In sight, so this is good. My name is Tomi, and the bigger focus of my Civic Fellows project, or the work I did this summer, focuses on international aid as well as community development. So kind of the bigger, I guess, interest I had in what I did this summer came from about 2 years ago. So I participated in the Global Health Sophomore Scholars in Residence program, and that's me right there in the middle. This is with Dr. Rick Mays, and he was also my academic advisor for this summer. But a lot of the good work that we did during that course, or a lot of discussions we had, what does it mean to be a volunteer, especially in an area where you're not the population, you're not living the life that they are, and wanting to go to other areas and help out. So we went to like Grundy, Virginia, which is labeled the sickest town in America. So the work of like remote area medical, health wagon, which is talked about before, went to the Dominican Republic as well. And also I did a trip to Thailand last summer as well, and that was mostly through a hospital shadowing program. And at the end of that experience, I kind of got uncomfortable with the work I did there. It felt more like a vacation versus an actual learning experience. And it really bothered me because I want to work in the global health field, and I told myself, I don't want to be feeling this way when I go abroad if I work in the field. So I kind of got to this question about, is there a way that any organization or a nonprofit organization could take a model of some sort that really focuses on the communities that they're serving, but also making sure that the efforts of all these culturally competent volunteers who come in are actually doing the work of the organization and doing it well in a way that ties back into the community. So while I was thinking about this question, I came across this New York Times article called The Volunteer's Dilemma, and it goes through a lot of the common critiques about volunteering abroad, international aid. And while I was scrolling through the comments, which is usually like a risky thing to do if you're ever online, to go through the comments, it's pretty civil, but going through, I saw this comment that really stuck out to me. It's a little blurry, but it's from a woman called Becca Ross Russell. And she talks about an organization that she founded, and she said she works in Tanzania, she works with vulnerable and orphan children, but they really try to combat against a common issue seen with volunteerism. And it led me to her website, which was thesmallthings.org, and I clicked on it. And I read through what the organization does, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is great, it took all the common critiques, and they really built a model around this organization that works on them. And I kind of just reached out of the blue and said, hey, I really love the work that you guys do. Is there any way I can get involved? I didn't even think I would get a response. And Becca actually emailed me back within like 4 hours and said, you know what, let's work on something together. And it took us many months to formulate what my true role would be as a volunteer on the ground, but it was kind of amazing just reaching out and being able to eventually go work with this organization. So this is The Small Things. It's in Nkoaranga, Tanzania, so East Africa. It's about an hour outside of Mount Kilimanjaro. So what was really cool about this organization is it was founded by 2008 by Becca, but also with collaboration with a local mama. So they called her Mama Pendo, but she worked with the local orphanage in the area, and she had been there for decades and really wanted more support for the orphanage itself. So Becca came in and established more of a presence, and their main mission, I guess, was to endorse the creation of sustainable and evolving care plans for orphan and vulnerable children. A lot of what TST does as an organization is really focusing on trying to find the families of the children that are placed in their care. If there's any family members, if there's anybody in the community who could take that child in possibly, they usually will send in social workers, they'll send in, if they're possible, microloan programs as well that they set up through TST to really work with the families to create an environment where the child could be reunified with that family. Another thing that's really great is the Happy Family Children Village, which is actually right up here. That's the building featured there. So if any of the children cannot be reunified with their family for some reason, what they try to do is place them in these residential units, but they're really families. There's these mamas or the local caregivers for these children that stay with them throughout their whole lives. So it's not volunteers who are being the ones caring for these children day in and day out. It's these mamas who form relationships with them. And they also have this big family that they always can call and support them through things as they're going through school. So it's just a really great organization that does things in a unique way, but there's a small organization just started. They don't necessarily have the big resources of the common organization that we think about when we think about international aid. And one other really cool thing about TST too is that they specifically look for local Tanzanian members to to run a lot of their departments. So everything is led by Tanzanian staff members. The volunteers who are on the ground or the expats that live there are only supporting them. And any volunteer who comes through also has to be in a support role. They're not in any sort of leadership roles or anything like that. So my role coming in, before I came in, Teresa, who's our development head for TST, she was the one who asked the staff members, we have Tomi coming in, what can she do for your organization? And they said, you know, we really want someone who's going to come in and help us with computer skills and also English learning skills. Tanzania, English is a main language, but it's not really spoken. It's mostly Swahili. So they said to be able to further their mission as well. If anybody coming in are potential donors and they want to make a presentation in English and feel confident about it. They also wanted to know how better for the computer skills, again, for sending emails, so it runs the organization a little bit more effectively. So this is kind of a picture of me running one of the workshops for the English learning skills, and we had these once a week. We would go through books, workshops. We played Jeopardy a lot. Everybody loved Jeopardy. They're very competitive, that whole staff, which was a lot of fun, but also doing things like the computer skills and making sure they felt comfortable with sending emails through Gmail or making their own presentations so they can kind of feel empowered that they can run this organization by themselves. And really that's the main goal too, is to make sure that in a couple years down the road, they don't want any expats, they don't want any long-term volunteers there. They just want local Tanzanians running the whole organization. So that was kind of my role in supporting them in that goal. So what kind of things that TST did really well and what I picked up on, kind of going back into my main question as well, was the role of the mamas was really integral for the children. One of the main critiques about a lot of these different organizations that work abroad, or especially with children or orphans, is that there's just rotating staff of short-term volunteers that really affects the psychological development of these children. So these local mamas, again, stay with them their whole lives. They're a huge family. These children are pretty much always around their mamas. They supervise them, and it's just a really great way for them to always have that family unit, which is really psychologically important for them. Volunteers who come in usually have to make a commitment a minimum of 3 months. Most of them will stay 1 year, 2 years. Some people love it so much they stay forever. And I saw a lot of people like that who work there. But some of the things like feeding time or putting the children to sleep, that would be the role of the volunteers who would support the mamas with that as well. But other things that volunteers could do too if they're coming in for maybe a shorter amount of times, less than 3 months, is usually doing things within their own skill set. So actually this picture down here features a mural that was made by a family that I met there, and the mother of this group, her name is Nikki, this couple who came in, she was the art teacher. So she said, I really want to do something, I know I won't be here for too long, but she was able to use some of the designs the children actually made to make a beautiful mural. This was in the community development, or the community building that they just built, so they wanted to do more classrooms, more community workshops, so just making that room much more lively and beautiful, and it was fantastic. The children really got involved, so just another way that volunteers can come in with their own skill sets and improve the environment for everyone, really. And also what was really cool too is that my site supervisor, Teresa, was really interested in me seeing different types of nonprofits in Tanzania as well. So we want to, one nonprofit that really focused on training local women to be able to be daycare teachers and forming daycares in different either children homes or schools themselves. And it's really a great part of forming daycares in the region too was enabling parents to also be able to go out and seek work, especially women, and to have a sliding scale of sorts. So there's some sort of accountability with the daycare programs, but also making sure it's affordable for a lot of different families who really depended on the income from one parent or two parents as well. Another one was St. Jude's that we went to visit, which is a really selective, beautiful private school that we went to and visited. Started by an Australian woman. She's been featured in 60 Minutes, and the whole point of the school was to really target children in very vulnerable families, very poor families in the Tanzanian region that we were in, and be able to provide them with like a world-class education so they can come back to their families, uplift them as well, also to the community as a whole. If you educate just one child really well, they can come back, it raises the whole community up. And actually, Rebel Wilson, who's been in like Pitch Perfect, visited the school like a few days after me, so I was a little like, I could have seen a celebrity, but it was okay. And then also social enterprise too, and how that meshes into nonprofit work too. There was a man named Chris. He was a jewelry maker, and he came from Australia, but he trained a lot of the local Tanzanians to build jewelry as well. And this particular social enterprise was linked with TST as well, so a lot of their profits came back to TST, and a lot of the people who worked in his jewelry business as well were parents of some of those children in the care of TST as well, so really kind of tying back into the community and getting some really good work done. All right, so some final thoughts about my experience and my time abroad. So being able to see the work of TST, they're a small nonprofit, but it was really great because I was privy to see how things were run and also what sort of difficulties a lot of nonprofits will come against. So even though what I saw was TST was really good as far as meeting their mission of really being aware of the concerns of the community, but doing it in a very competent and cultural, sensitive way, was really great, but they still ran into some issues as well, seeing as there's some things about, how quickly do we expand our programs? Why do we go abroad? We want to stay in a community, but there's so many other children who need help. Where do we, set that cutoff as well was really important. One other thing too that I like to mention is the role of Mzungus, which is the term for outsiders in Kiswahili, and working abroad as well. It just, for me too, I felt like, I mentioned a lot in my presentation, coming in with a skill set, but also coming in with the mentality of what it means to volunteer abroad is really important. For me, it was pretty isolated where I was living, especially for like the last 5 weeks of my internship. I was pretty much alone in like this remote, village, and mostly heard cows and chickens most of the time throughout the day. But also being prepared to come in and say, can I even work in these environments for long periods of time? It's very difficult for people to admit that who want to work abroad as well. And lastly, how can you emulate a model like TST? And I think it's really important to know that the context or the location of where you want to set this organization up, it matters. It really, TST is really ingrained in the community. They required community support to even get started. Can this be done in other areas? I'm not really quite sure. I think they would need that community support to be so successful as TST has been. And it's something that goes back and forth about how do we implement some of the core facts or core values of TST into other organizations. And I don't know quite yet, but I feel like there's a lot of work that could be done on that. And acknowledgement, so Dr. Rick Mays, he was my academic advisor for the summer. Teresa Walsh, Becca Ross Russell, and the TST staff, of course, Tanzania, but send a lot of love to them. Cassie Price, thank you very much. Civic Fellowship Program, and most importantly, you guys as well. I know it's been a long night, but thank you for bearing through this program. All right, thank you very much.